about that. But we have become so warped. Like we are the judge of what God does. Friends, God is the judge of what we do. He tells us what's right and wrong. We don't tell God what's right and wrong. That's the problem we've got ourselves into. And so what I want to do this morning is talk about sexuality from this passage and from some other biblical passages. First of all, I want to give you 4 reasons. Let's just talk about sexuality for a second. There's 4 reasons God created sex. And you need to probably have this written down in your Bible because someday you're going to have to talk to your kids, your grandkids, somebody else, and you're going to have to help them figure this out. You don't get this unless you have an open Bible, okay? There's 4 reasons that God created sex. The ideology today that we determine our sexuality, that we determine whether we're male or female, isn't even true. When people say follow the science is you're either born male or what? Female, that's it. People can say all they want. That's the facts. That's reality. And it's all the way down to every cell. And so when you start in Genesis and you understand that it's God who created the heavens and the earth, and it's God who created Adam and Eve, and He created them male and female, then God gave them a blessing. This is a blessing. Be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. What does that mean? Have kids. They're a blessing. And when the world comes along and says, kids are not a blessing, you know that's demonic. When the world comes along and says, you know what? There's too many people on the earth. We need to figure out a way to eliminate, X billion number of people on the planet. I'm just telling you, that's demonic. Reproduction. All through God's creative story, He creates the birds. And what does He tell them to do? He blesses them and says, have baby what? Birds. He creates the fish. Says they're teeming in the sea and the rivers. And He tells them to reproduce after their kind. Creeping things, reproduce after their own kind. You know what's amazing today? Is people today say, we can determine our own sexuality, determine our own what's right and wrong in regard to sexuality. And once you step out of the confines of God, reproduction ends. We'll talk more about that another time. But anyways, so reproduction is one. Number 2, bonding. Genesis 2:24, it says, a man shall leave his father and mother, cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. You remember what Jesus said? When he was asked the question, can a man divorce his wife for any reason? No. What God has joined together, let no man what? Separate. So the sexual union, there's something unique, so unique about it that in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, it says that every sin that a man commits is outside the body, but when a man commits this sin, it's against his own body. And he says, how dare you join yourself to a harlot? Do you not understand that you're bonding with them? Bonding. It's a special gift. Marriage is a special gift. So you've got reproduction. You've got the bonding of the marriage union. You got purity. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 in verse 1. And it's actually used in 2 different ways. One in 1 Corinthians 7, it's used to singles. If you burn with passion, better to marry. Let each woman have her own man. Let each man have his own wife. And notice their possessive pronouns. And boy, talk about a pastor getting in trouble by reading that passage. Yeah, you're not your own. When you get married, you're bound to your spouse. For how long? Till death do us part. And that bonding takes place. Why? Why get married? Well, one of the reasons is for moral purity, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1. But it's also a sense of maintenance. And that is when you get married, you're going to be tempted. You're going to have sexual temptations. And the goal is to turn those passions that you have towards your spouse. If it's turned towards anyone else, it's not pleasing to God. But if it's turned towards your spouse, it's pleasing to God. So 1 Corinthians 7:5 emphasizes the purity of marriage, of caring for your spouse. And then number 4, pleasure. Now, Proverbs 5 says this. It says, be exhilarated with the love of the wife of your youth. And then it goes on and gives such plain English that many of you would blush in this room and light up this room with your red face. I could read to you the 8 chapters of of Song of Solomon, and you would go like, oh, I can't believe he's saying that in church. Well, God created it. In fact, let me just give you one. The Shulamite woman, the woman in Solomon's wife, she says to her beloved, such beautiful words, You know, the guy that says your hair is like goat hair and anyways. Okay, so there's some cultural differences, but you can get it, okay. And she says to her husband, my beloved, come into my garden. I won't go on with what the rest of it says. I will just say it's beautiful and it has to do with the blessing of God. Listen, sex isn't an evil thing. Sex is a good thing. It's created by God for reproduction, bonding, purity, pleasure. But when it's outside of that, all of us suffer. And you know what? None of us there's nobody in this room that hasn't suffered because of it. All of us have the experience at some level. Some of us, as children, one of our parents ran off and had an affair and abandoned us. Some of us, growing up, don't have grandparents intact as the way God had designed because that had happened maybe with our grandparents or one of our uncles or aunts. Or maybe it's our sister or our brother, their spouse cheated on them and so that it's broken. Or maybe you got married and you just thought, you're going to just have this wonderful life, and then your spouse had an affair. And I realized that there are, listen, friends, everybody here has wounds from people breaking this.